Alrighty, we are recording. I just have to ask for class reasons. Do you consent to being recorded?
Yes.
Fantastic, thank you. So hello, my name is Eloise.
I'm Hada.
And we are interviewing you for a class project for AHSC 260 Program Planning and Development. We're here to ask you a couple of questions. We're going to let you know what our goal and objectives are for this meeting, and then we have some questions for you. Take your time answering them. If there's any more we didn't ask you want to expand upon or bring up that we did not cover, please feel free to do so. Okay, so our goals and objectives for this meeting. Our first one is just to understand how the Concordia Food Coalition runs and what programs you guys are responsible for. After the interview, we aim to know at least 2 of the key programs you run, and specifically all the different steps to running them is our main objective. And then our secondary goal is to know what your role in the organization is and how the organization both came to be and might grow in the future. Fantastic. Okay. Are you good to start some questions?
I'm ready to go.
Fantastic. So first of all, could you explain to us what your role in this organization is, please?
Sure. Well, first of all, my name is Shyla Wolf, and I'm the executive director of the Concordia Food Coalition. So my role in the organization is similar to what a CEO does for like a for-profit corporation, generally manage the overarching connecting the overarching goals of the organization to the day-to-day operations and ensuring that we comply with the legal and contractual obligations of the like our community, because we're a nonprofit, that the organization makes to our community, as well as I oversee the staff that run a lot of the programs.
Yes, thank you very much. So we have a couple questions about the organization in general and like how it came to be, how you guys run. So our first question is based off of like your website, you guys are specialized in food sovereignty. Could you explain to us what the difference is between food safety and food sovereignty? So we hear a lot about food safety.
Sure, there's definitely a big difference between food safety and food sovereignty. I'm usually asked the question, what's the difference between food security and food sovereignty?
That's a great one too.
Food safety refers to the health and safety, or the hygiene and the sanitation and the like material safety of human beings that work with and around food, as well as the human beings that consume food. So that's much more of a compliance issue and an individual health issue. Food sovereignty speaks to the idea of every human being's fundamental right to equitable, culturally appropriate access to food, and their ability to control that access and what their food system provides to them. So there's a pretty huge difference between the two. Food safety operates as a function of the food chain and like society, where food sovereignty is essentially this ideal structure where humans have the ability to control their own food and how they access it.
Okay, fantastic. And then what about security then? Apologies.
Yeah, food security is referring to just having access and not necessarily the control of access, having enough access to the kinds of food that you would want to eat and is nourishing for you.
Okay. As an individual. Thank you very much. That was, yeah, a pretty good question we had. So our first question would be, how did this organization start? Did you start it, or were you just a more recent person to control it? Yeah.
Sure, yeah. The CFC came out of like a lot of the work, or a lot of the organizing that happened off the back of the 2012 student strikes. And it was around the time that students started to like learn their agency and their ability to organize and secure access to fundamental human rights, which they considered during the 2012 strikes education a fundamental human right. They moved back to food after like succeeding in like the stopping of the tuition hikes by the provincial government. So a lot of the students that were really active in that turned to student politics at Concordia and started to take on some of those smaller projects or issues and challenges that they felt like were impeding democratic processes and access to fundamental human rights like food. So the CFC kind of formed out of a response to challenging the request for proposals that the Concordia administration had put out. Essentially, they had opened a tender for large corporations to bid on the major food services contract. The major food services contract being the one that furnishes food at the cafeterias and several of the retail outlets around campus, like the Starbucks, the Sprouts Cafe or whatever it's, or the like some of the little kiosks in and around, like in the different
Faro, I believe.
Pardon?
Faro. At Loyola, it's called Faro, I believe.
Faro is the coffee that is
Yeah.
served, but the Buzz Bistro is the cafeteria at Loyola, the Grey Nuns cafeteria at downtown, and there's a bunch of different cafeterias. And Faro is I think in the SP building now they have a new they have reopened the cafe. Is that where you're referring to?
Yeah. There's a
Right.
couple
Okay.
at Loyola. I believe that big contract we partially learned in class is currently run by Amarak, I believe.
Aramark, that's correct. Yeah, right now
Aramark,
it's
perfect, thank you.
yeah, by Aramark. So the CFC was formed as a part of during the campaign against the traditional way that the request for proposals is turns into the contract award for running those services. It has always been a large transnational corporation that runs them. Those transnational corporations operate to like on economies of scale, exploitation of environment and human beings and animals, and exists to like maximize profits for shareholders that don't live in this community. So students were mobilizing or organizing around advocating for an alternative model to run the food services at Concordia. There's a few different ways that could look, but essentially the CFC formed as a result of those students trying to coalesce all the different food groups to help support a change in the way the administration contracts out food services, because we have a parallel network of student-run food groups that provide, thousands of meals to students a day, most of which are free. But they were never really being taken seriously by the administration as a viable like stakeholder or advisor or even actual like service provider to take over the cafeteria services and the other retail outlets. So the CFC was the sort of like a formal mechanism, a second tier for all of those groups to work together and make a plan to get rid of this revolving door of big three food service transnational corporations.
Thank you. You actually touched on a bunch of points that we have more questions about, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Our first one would be, we learned about Aramark in our class, and we were wondering what are some of the things that we learned, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you hope to eventually take over everything that Aramark does at Concordia, including like the food distribution. And we were wondering what are some of the like programs and things you have in place to further that goal.
Yeah, so Aramark does run, like I said, it's like 7 to 9 retail outlets, and including the 2 cafeterias, I should say. And again, the CFC was formed to essentially take over all of that or find a way to oust transnational corporations from campus, because that could look like self-operated. But yeah, currently we're incubating the new food enterprise to essentially be a separate organization, like a community-based, not-for-profit business, though, that can operate the same way. I mean, provide the same services, not operate the same way that Aramark does. So serve all the same needs that Aramark currently serves, but also a social return on investment. It's modeled after Diversity Food Services, which it formed kind of out of the same needs at the University of Winnipeg, as a joint venture between the university itself and a community-run organization. So we're trying to do the same kind of model. It took us about 10 years to figure out an alternative that the university, like that the Concordia administration might actually consider seriously, because we've tried in 3 other RFPs to get them to look at different models. This is the first time that we feel like we're meeting all of the needs of the Venn diagrams of the different kinds of stakeholders. So that's one of the major programs. It's the incubation of the new food enterprise, which is a partnership between some of the food groups on campus, Diversity Food Services itself at the University of Winnipeg, and hopefully the administration, but the CFC is leading cause. Oh, and the CSU is involved as well.
Oh, the student one?
Student Union, the Concordia Student Union. Yeah.
Could you explain what RFP, I think, is you said?
Request for proposals. So that's the legal, it's kind of like the job call out. If they have a position to fill, if an organization or business has a position to fill, they'll put out a job posting to get people to apply for it. Well, the administration of Concordia does the same thing when they have a big contract that they have to fill. So the food services contract is one of those, and they put out a call for proposals or a request for proposals, or like the acronym is RFP, and then businesses bid on that contract. They're just given a bunch of a description of the contract and certain metrics that they have to meet and stuff like that, and they offer to do it for a certain amount of money. They actually pay. The system at Concordia is that it's called the profit and loss model. So the contractor, like Aramark, pays the university for access to the space, like paying rent, like a business in a mall might pay rent for the retail location.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's not always like that at every university, but that's the model that's used at Concordia.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a couple more questions specifically about what you just explained, actually. So 2 questions. I'll ask them, you answer however you see fit. Our first one would be like, who you mentioned a bunch of stakeholders and shareholders being involved in this. Who are your stakeholders and your shareholders? And then the second one relates more to your budget. You said you guys have to pay, kind of like paying rent. What's your budget for all this, if you don't mind talking about it? And then answer as you see fit.
So yeah, the New Food Enterprise is one project that the Concordia Food Coalition is doing. And that's one, and we're incubating a separate business that would be able to take over the food services contract.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. And there are stakeholders in the foods that like the entire campus food system that's much broader. The active stakeholders or collaborators in the New Food Enterprise in particular are the Concordia Student Union, Diversity Food Services. These are partners. But like every student and possibly every campus goer would theoretically be a stakeholder in the project. So Concordia Student Union, Diversity Food Services, the Hive Cafe Co-op is also a collaborator in the project, as well as SEAS, which is a fee levy social economy group at Concordia. They provide education and incubation services. And we also have other partners like Enough, which is the waste, like composting and waste management education project on campus. Yeah, I could go on, but I feel like that's sufficient for now. All the food, like all the campus growing groups and food groups are effectively stakeholders that we want to ensure support or feel like this project meets the campus needs. The budget is public information. It is a $6 million annual operating. Yeah, so this is the Concordia Food Services contract. It's worth $6 million on an annual basis. And in 2026, when we hope to participate or actually take over food services, it'll probably be more. It'll probably be closer to like 7 million per year. The Concordia Food Coalition itself is a much smaller entity. Our budget is closer to like $200,000 a year.
Wow, that's still
our fee levy is smaller than that. We get 16 cents per undergraduate student, which works out to about $120,000 a year.
Interesting. That went up with the Hive adding breakfast last year, right? I believe we voted on that.
I think you misunderstand what the food coalition.
I might. So it's entirely possible. I'm sorry.
No,
Thank
that's
you. No, that's cool.
okay.
That's what I'm here to understand.
So being a second tier organization, we are not like all of the groups are independent. So the Food Coalition, we are, like the Hive Cafe is a member of ours, but we don't run the Hive Cafe.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay,
Um,
I'm sorry. That's what I'm here to
that's okay.
understand.
We have some of our own in-house programs, but
That's some of our questions.
yeah, but like all the food groups on campus, the well-established food groups on campus are their own independent entities, and we don't touch their money unless they ask us to.
Interesting.
Yeah,
And
the
so
the free lunch, I actually ran the free lunch the first year it was operating. It
cool.
has, you're right, there's the ASFA fee levy, and then the CSU gives some funds, and I think there was the ASFA increase to introduce the breakfast program. But I want to be clear that that's a separate
No,
project.
yeah, no, thank you for, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So all the food groups that we have, like the Hive, the People's Potato, all of those are work as a part, as members of your group, but you have your own independent programs, correct?
Yeah, we bring them together to discuss common challenges. Like we had our food group
Okay.
assembly on like just 2 weeks ago for that very reason. Like we treat them as though they are members of like we have this solidarity as campus food group
Okay.
actors, but we are not in charge of their projects.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. So you mentioned you have some in-home programs that you guys are running yourself as the CFC. Could you touch on those,
CFC for
please?
sure.
Thank you.
We have the farmers market, which we do run in partnership with groups like Cults of Action and Hamidu, but we coordinate that program and run it on a weekly basis through the summer and fall. And the holiday market is coming up on like next Thursday. We also, I mentioned the New Food Enterprise, which is something we're
Yes.
incubating. And the other thing that we incubate is we do have a food group development program. So any of the existing totally separate food groups on campus can apply for help from us. They can ask
Interesting.
for a little bit of money and any kind of either technical or professional training or support they might need. We try to connect them with experts that can give that. Speaking of food safety, for example, there's this thing called MAPAC, which is the Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries of Quebec. And in order to comply with like food safety rules about running food establishments or transforming and distributing food on campus, you need to have a permit for MAPAC, and you need to have people that work for the organization that are trained in food safety. So sometimes, about once a year, we coordinate a training, an in-person training for the groups that need to have their staff trained.
Interesting.
And we give out other things in the food group development program as well. We can help groups find space on campus or give them office space in our office, or connect them with other groups like CUTV if they want to do promotional materials, like make a commercial or do some other kind of advertising. We have a lawyer that we work with that we help. We can, we connect our groups with if they need. Other kinds of projects we do. Oh, the food group assemblies is sort of part of the food group development program. So we have all the groups come together twice a year to discuss challenges and how we can make the food system on campus better in like the grand scheme of things.
Okay.
We also have dinner and docs, which is like a monthly meetup for students to learn a little more about the food issues that affect them. So we watch a little documentary and cook some food together and eat it as like a bit of just a casual hangout. We used to have a weekly free supper program called Mother Hubbard's Cupboard, which was originally started by Multi-Faith, but we are still looking to rehome that just because we don't have as many resources to do that one. But we do other student education activities too, like the walking tours, the Good Food Around You walking tours, to show all students
Yeah.
around orientation where they can find student-run food establishments or like sustainability-minded food services and emergency food services. And the program that we started this year that I know you have a question about, what's not very, people aren't very aware of, is the
Yeah, that
food
is one that we have. Sorry?
The Food Revolution game is
Cool.
is a tour, like a digital, but like in real life tour as well. There's like landmarks around campus of historical moments, like places that had historical events happen in building the food movement on campus, like where the People's Potato first served its free meals out of, and um, yeah, history of like how the Hive was formed, and Cafe X, which was like the fine arts. It was actually one of the first cafes run by students on campus. So that one is a cool little educational program where if you check into at least 8 of the landmarks, you can get a free gift certificate to the
Cool.
Hive or the free go back.
That's really cool. Okay, thank you.
We make pop ed materials as well, like, or propaganda. So we just make little digestible guides or zines or 101 pamphlets about food issues, like the history of the student food movement, the like primers on industrial meat, on pesticides, on hormones and antibiotics, that kind of thing. So we have kind of like the food group support arm, and we have the student education and awareness arm.
Okay, thank you. I am just taking notes, that's why I keep looking down. I'm gonna let Hoda ask you a couple questions. But thank you. That was really very interesting. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so my question for you is, what are some of the biggest difficulties that you face within your organization, like budgeting or volunteering, or like just involvement in general?
At the moment, one of the biggest issues that we face is board engagement. So you know how most of these corporations, technically nonprofits or corporations, they do have to have a board of directors, and that board is, you know, democratically elected to represent the community that we serve. And they're the ones that steward the organization. Like we're staff members, but we're beholden to the community. We do need an informed and engaged board of directors to oversee what we're doing, make sure it like represents what the community wants, and that we're uh not doing anything shady as far as the government is concerned. And sometimes this is one of the years that's been harder to get active board members, so that's something that I find as a challenge that I'm not really sure how to solve right now. um yeah, I think there's like a bit of a saturation issue of students. So getting students to be passionate about an issue, it is also a little bit more difficult these days than it used to be. Although, I mean, simultaneously, there's just too many issues to be very passionate about. Not that students aren't passionate, but that there's a lot going on in the world that is tragic. So it's hard to have students organize around long-term food sovereignty. That's what they call prerogative politics or whatever like that. It's the idea of fighting for like a goal of an ideal world that you want to see, and that can be a little more difficult to do when there's a bunch of immediate crises, and especially humanitarian crises. So that feels like a tremendous challenge. Um, Other difficulties we face, certainly there's a big concern on like having enough money to run all of these programs. Is We don't have a long-term, we won't be able to keep the same capacity or trajectory, because the price of everything is increasing, but our fixed fee levy does not. We do get a lot of grants, but that requires a lot of administrative burden as well to manage those grants, seek out more of them, and do all the funder requirements. But increasing the fee levy would be probably necessary. Also, we're facing probably pretty big income shortage or revenue shortages next year because of the provincial government tuition hikes that are coming in. You know, like there's probably going to be a 30% reduction in student enrollment, which means a 30% reduction in fee levy dues coming through. So yeah, all the things you said are challenges we face.
I have a question within that question. Would you prefer having like students as volunteers? Do you think that would help with the organization, like rather than having adults, I guess, take care of it?
We do have a lot of students that are both staff and volunteers at the CFC. Which kind of, in what capacity do you mean?
I mean, like, would you just rather have students volunteer, like with the work and everything? Like maybe that would help spread the word of mouth.
Well, we do have students that volunteer with the organization, especially on the board of directors. We would love to have more. Absolutely.
Okay. Are there any programs or events that did not work within your organization, and what went wrong, if yes?
So the food revolution game is not that it's not working, but it's not getting as much attention or traction as we had hoped. I think promotion is difficult. There's like a bit of a gray area right now around social media, like promoting in the virtual world and promoting in real life. During the pandemic, we had to face a lot of we had to like look in the mirror pretty intensely about what kinds of programs we were going to have continue after everything kind of started back up again. And Mother Hubbard Cupboard was one of the programs that was very valuable, but it was tough for us to understand with our limited budget how we could continue to deliver it. As like it's cooking, like preparing food, working with lots of volunteers and administering food is a labor intensive thing and expensive. And we were like divided about our ultimate goal is to get rid of transnational corporations and develop a more food sovereign campus. Our goal is not food security programs like food access programs. Both of those are necessary, but we can't do both of them. So we felt like we needed to choose. So we started to look to rehome the food access programs like Mother Hubbard's. We're just doing them at a smaller scale to like just a once a month cooking and documentary event that's much more laid back.
Okay, thank you. My next question is, what are some changes that you are looking forward to in the next few years? Like, what are some changes that you would want to apply in the organization to make it better in the next few years? Like, do you have any plans? Are you thinking of any new programs?
We have a program or something that we just started with a partnership with George Brown College called the Communal Lunch Project. So we got some funding to work with them. Well, they got some funding and chose to work with us to increase, to kind of do the student education side of things and the campus food group development side of things together, because ultimately they do rely on each other. It's usually students that start and run other programs for students to like improve quality of life. So one of the things that we're doing in the next, like getting more of those kinds of research partnerships that can evaluate our programs and also fund them and test whether they're not productive, but successful is one thing. And a big programming piece that may make a change in the future is taking the coalition national, because the Communal Lunch Project is a national organization or a national project. And I don't know if you've ever heard of meal exchange, but it was a national program, I guess, to help students like have ambassadors on campus and teach students about healthy food. That sunset, that program doesn't exist anymore. So there's not like a mechanism for campuses to come together and talk to each other. But with Communal Lunch Project, we are looking at a way, we're working with people that are like the stewards of the legacy of meal exchange and figuring out what can take, like, fill the gap in leadership or that meal exchange has left. We're starting a new, we call it a boot camp, but it's like a conference for students to come together in June. It's called Devour Campus. It's like develop our campus, but also devour. That'll be like educational, but also helping like them have peer-to-peer mentoring and discussing what they're doing on their campuses, what common challenges they're facing, what solutions we can think of like together, what collective action can be taken so that there's increased food security, but also food services that are like truly sustainable, because that's usually what, and getting out of like exploitation. So that the first conference will happen in June 2024, and we hope to make that an annual thing, and ideally make a platform for student groups or coalitions built across, like at campuses all across Canada, to work together.
Thank you very much. It's a little louder. I had to move. I apologize. So we have about 2 more questions in relation to, because you mentioned you were working with new organizations and other colleges. How do you make sure that the members, as you explained it, of your coalition or the different schools you partner with have the same values and the same like mission objectives as you? And what are some of the things you consider really important when you pick an organization or a new group to work with?
Values are certainly something that are very important when picking an organization to work with or a group to work with. And it can be quite simple because most value-based organizations are very upfront about what their values are and plaster them all over not only their like online platforms, but also within the kinds of activities that they do. So we usually see that right out front, what kind of values they have, and that's the step one for whether or not to work together. And usually the goal of those purpose-driven organizations or value-based organizations are also quite clear. So if it's a common goal, it's fairly simple to figure out if we should work together. That feels too simple of an answer, though.
I mean, it can be very simple. Sometimes the answer is just that easy. Okay, cool. Okay, so my second to last question would be just what are some of the outcomes you've already seen, some of the positive or negative things that have already come out of the different programs and collaborations you've had?
Sure. I actually do want to go back to the last question first before I answer your other.
No, please take your time.
I think one of the things that can be difficult, or like people can have mission creep or mission attrition in organizations, is if there's sort of a social or greenwashing element. Just stating values is clearly not enough. There are times where we would choose to not work with another organization, even, or like we originally intended to collaborate. But if we learn that they're funded by some sort of dubious source or something like that, we may turn away from that collaboration, even if it on the surface seems like we have the same values. There really needs to be praxis involved. That can be a little radical sometimes, but yeah, usually we're just looking for the reality that you say you're going to do, you say these are the things you want to do, and there's like integrity in how those things come to fruition. Could you repeat your second question?
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for expanding on the values question. So my question was, what are some of the like outcomes you've already seen from the programs you've put in place, the collaborations you've had, positive or negative? What are some of the immediate outcomes you've seen?
Yeah, that's tough to reflect on like 10 years of um program delivery, but I mean, there's been lots of positive outcomes. Our food group development program used to be called the working group program, and that's the Hive was born out of being a working group of the CFC. Cult of Action was a working group of the CFC. Mind Heart Mouth was like most of the growing groups on campus um, took advantage of our programs, and I would say that's certainly a success story that we were able to give them some of the first steps to get their bearings while they took off with their great ideas. Certainly can't take credit for everything that they've done, but very proud of the ability to incubate or support the incubation of, I don't know, about 20 different groups that have provided food services or food education on campus, and many of which still do. Yeah, those are great impacts. I mean, seeing students learn, our educational events like building food sovereign campuses, lectures, or pop ed materials, when people realize the vastness of their, like, hundreds of students come to those events on an annual basis, and they, I guess, get that sense of the broadness of food system impact and like how individual decisions inform collective systems, and how food is at the intersection of virtually all either oppression or liberation. um yeah, having students participate in our programs, they get a sense of that, and they also tend to get a sense of belonging or like of building community, and then ultimately creating projects like Cult of Action that we then get to see come. So there's just this like multi-step building on a movement that feels like a major success. It's all like the incrementalism and patience is required, just like with growing a garden, but it's really rewarding. That said, it's also been 10 years of trying to do our ultimate goal of getting rid of multinational or transnational corporations on campus. And when there are new administrators that come in, and they have like the invisible power to shape the foodscape on campus, it can feel like a big knock backwards if you've been negotiating with a few very powerful people for many, many years, and then there's a personnel change and you have to start from scratch, working with a person that doesn't that you have not developed any sort of relationship with, that doesn't understand the dynamics of between students and student groups and the administration. That can be a very big challenge to our programs and what we've been building and the reputation that we have, and makes like momentum feel like it's either slowed or gone backwards.
Thank you. I really like the phrase, the framing of individual decisions form collective action. Was a really nice, the analogy of the garden. It was really nice. Thank you very much. All right, my last question is just, is there anything that we did not mention that you would like to touch upon? Anything you want to talk to us about that we might not have asked?
Well, I don't know why I'm compelled to say the thing about our strategic plan. You can always, I think you can find that on our website. Well, you can find like the research that we've been doing that informs the work, and like all of the food groups that are run by community organizations or students on our website. under our food system. And I think it's worth taking a look there because we just stand on the shoulders of these giants and try to like champion their work. And I think that's pretty important. But our strategic plan, you know, you were asking a lot about programs, and we have a lot, but we like to think that they're guided by sort of 5 channels of systems change.
Please do
And
tell.
that I think is pretty key. So like everything within everything we do, we want it to either be an education, an innovation, incubation, collaboration, or a celebration of better food systems. Yeah, where is the strategic plan? I'll just send you the link.
Thank you. Could you elaborate? You've used that word a lot on what you mean by incubation. All the other ones I know, but you've used that word a lot.
So incubation is like well, much like you might incubate some like eggs like to hatch some chickens or something. It's like we try to make sure the necessary environment is available, include like hard and soft resources like funding, materials, humans like experts to build either a new business or a new project that makes the food system better. So we're incubating the new food enterprise much more directly. Like we're going to build the business plan and create the governance structure and like negotiate a contract with the administration. But ultimately it will be a separate business and it won't be run by the CFC. We're just gonna like hatch it and make sure it keeps going.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you very much. And yeah, we saw your list when we were doing our research. Our third teammate, who unfortunately is not here today, was very sad to learn that Burritoville no longer exists. She was looking at the page and going, "What happened to Burritoville? I wanted to go there." So we saw your list.
It is a shame that Burritoville didn't
Thank
work
you.
out. I wasn't working for the CFC at that time. I think I was still at the Hive, but it
Yeah.
was a great institution for a really great sweet potato burrito. I just shared the last year's annual report that does have our strategic plan in it, and if you haven't read it, it might give a lot more technical details that could be good for reference for your project.
Thank you. Last question, just because you brought something up and it made me think of it. How did you go from working for the Hive to your current position as executive director? How did that change happen for you?
I mean, it was a long process. I worked,
Yeah.
I've been in food for most of my life, but when I left the Hive, like as a worker member, I left the Hive and started working on or like volunteering on the board of directors and getting involved in research that the CFC was part of. I ended up doing a action research project at the CFC on all the food groups, like a needs and assets mapping of the food groups.
Oh.
And yeah, I just moved from working in the kitchen or like in restaurant to how to actually improve food systems through research. And then I ended up I was working with the CFC at the Hive, but only as a partner. And then I ended up in research as a worker, like a staff member at CFC, and just have been there for a while. So
Amazing. Thank you very much. Yeah, needs and assets reports are what we study in this class. We learn about like needs assessment and budgets and essentially everything it takes to make a program. So like from input to output and everything in the middle is what we learn. So thank you very much.
wow, I'd love to see what you come up with.
Yeah, we can absolutely send you what we do. It's going to be more of just like, this is what we wanted to learn. Here's what we learned. But we can absolutely share it with you if you're interested. And we can give you our professor's name. We actually met Maggie Morrison because on that day that there was a whole there was like a farmer's market, but then after there was a big table of like everything that had been farmed. And then our professor ran into Maggie Morrison and brought her into class and was like, "Yo, talk to my kids about this." And it was really fun. And I go to the Hive a lot, so I was interested in talking to the CFC and everything. So it was very interesting to me. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad, and I hope one day we can. It'd be awesome to have like a, what do they call it? Developmental evaluation. Do you do that in your
We've talked about them a little bit. Yeah, we can absolutely look into that. Thank you.
for some of the programs? That would be cool.
Yeah, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
You
Thank
too.
Bye.
you.
Good luck. Bye.
Bye.